Africa is a mineral-rich, resource-rich continent. Is that correct?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay. Which are there success stories for the citizens of African countries when these larger, more prosperous nations or companies from more prosperous areas come in and exploit these minerals?
Chairman, there's very few cases. When the Chinese Communist Party is outed on them pulling out raw materials, not benefiting the populations of the host country, they've been trying to come up with ways how they can stay there and process only at the protests of the people of these African countries that host these mineral resources.
And talking about the continent of Africa. And if we do that, we've got to listen to the African. I can just recall, and sometimes many of my colleagues, especially on the other side of the aisle, argue that we don't get the votes we need at times in the UN from African countries. I recall when we were trying to get votes in regards to Russia's illegal invasion into Ukraine. And I had to call African ambassadors. And they said, now you're calling me? We haven't heard from the United States for a while. Now you want something from me? We've been asking for assistance in regards to security. And then I watched to see what was taking place when we look at our diplomacy. It was over 2 decades it took before in the 117th Congress we passed a state authorization bill and had to do that through the NDAA as opposed to saying we're going to stand strongly on diplomacy. Guess what China did during that period of time? They doubled their diplomacy budget. Guess what else is happening? For the first time, China has more consulates than the United States of America. General Kelly said either we do and get engaged in more diplomacy or you're going to have to spend more money on bullets. We have an opportunity to engage and listen to allies and work with our allies. Many allies who have more and should have more responsibility on the continent because they colonized it, working with us collectively to try to make sure that the Chinas and the Russias of the world are not invested and we are invested and we are not. It's our challenge. And I hope that when we get past this debate, you'll be able to have another one. And I look forward to doing it particularly in our committee so that we can figure out collectively together, as Ms. Ilhan said, how we can work together and listen to make sure that we have an overall strategy. And I say this in regards to both parties. I say this to the administration, who should be doing more on the continent of Africa. So yes, this is not a partisan debate. This is an American debate. This is an opportunity to have attention to a continent that is the fastest growing and the youngest on this planet, that we have ignored for far too long. We have to wake up.
Hello and what's up, good people? What's up, brothers and sisters? Welcome back to the channel and welcome for another interesting video. Now, I really believe that all Africans and by extension all Black people should have a glimpse of that Kissinger report, the Kissinger report of 1974, which was really a policy document that really outlined the intentions the United States of America has towards the African continent and actually the African people. I did a video about just a little bit about that, the Kissinger report, in a previous video. You can check it out in the channel. And it really puts things out clear on the relationship, how America sees politically, how it deems, it perceives Africa. And it really gives us an explanation to what is really happening in the geopolitical world in terms of the relationship between America, or actually generally the so-called the Western world, and Africa, and why the prosperity and the unity of Africa is and still remains a very serious threat to the existence of the Western world, and thus making a leader like Ibrahim Traoré, and of course there have been predecessors like him before him, that you know what happened to him, a threat to not only France, not only Europe, but the entire Western world. Yeah, so let's watch this video and we'll be back.
So the real reason why they killed Gaddafi is he wanted to have a currency for Africa, and he wanted Africa to unite against the exploitations of the Western world. So they had to kill him. So there's a new guy trying to do that in Africa right now. So guess what is going to happen to him? They're going to kill him.
I know. I love this guy too. I think it's great he's doing that. But
So Burkina Faso president Ibrahim Traoré, is that how you say it, announces a bold plan to unite the African continent under one system. He wants to create a United States of Africa where all African countries will come together as one. There will be one government system, one currency allowed called Afro money, and one African passport. All Africans will be able to travel freely without visas. He also said the wealth of Africa should be shared equally among all countries so no one is left behind. That's why they kill everybody. That's why they got rid of the guy Mossadegh when he was running Iran in 1954 because he wanted to keep the oil profits for their own people. Immediately the CIA overthrew him.
do you know that the Shah got thrown because the trilaterals wanted to put in the Ayatollah because the Shah minorly wasn't doing what they wanted?
Yes.
So that dictator wasn't even good enough for the other one. They put in the Ayatollah.
And so the same thing. The reason why they killed Gaddafi, under Gaddafi, Libya had the highest standard of living in all of Africa. What sealed Gaddafi's fate was his plan to create a pan-African gold-based currency to release the continent from the shackles of the petrodollar. This couldn't be tolerated by the West. The rest is history. That's why they killed him.
Well, I remember
we've covered that on this show many times. We've told you, and that's another truth that I don't think Jon Stewart will ever tell you either.
Well, he doesn't know. Do you ever see Gaddafi and Mad Dog Killer on Showtime? It was a documentary about when we kill one of these people, we make like a good, and we killed a bad man.
Yeah.
So they talked about, and they made it like he had this cuckoo idea that he was going to unite Africa under a currency.
Yeah.
And he's like a tin pot dictator.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what the petrodollar was when I saw that.
Okay.
So that's where they're laughing at the very idea of that. But that is why they kill these people.
So let's watch this.
More speculation has been raised on the reasons for NATO's intervention in Libya. And as RT's Laura Emmett reports, the organization may have been trying to prevent Gaddafi from burying the American buck.
According to some, it's about protecting civilians.
We must not tolerate this regime using military force against its own people.
Others say it's about oil.
The only reason they're interested with Libya is about the oil. You'd think we'd be in Iraq if the major export there was broccoli.
But some are convinced intervention in Libya is all about currency, specifically Gaddafi's plan to introduce the gold dinar, a single African currency made from gold, a true sharing of the wealth.
It's one of these things that you have to plan almost in secret, because as soon as you say you're going to change over from the dollar to something else, you're going to be targeted. There were two conferences on this, one in 1996 and another one in the year 2000, called the World Mataba Conference, organized by Gaddafi. And everybody was interested. I think most countries in Africa were keen.
Gaddafi didn't give up. In the months leading up to the military intervention, he called on African and Muslim nations to join together to create this new currency that would rival the dollar and euro. They would sell oil and other resources around the world only for gold dinars. It's an idea that would shift the economic balance of the world. Countries' wealth would depend on how much gold they have, not how many dollars they trade. And Libya has 144 tons of gold. The UK has double that, but 10 times the population.
If Gaddafi had an intent to try to reprice his oil or whatever else the country was selling in the global markets and accept something else as a currency, or maybe launch a gold dinar currency, any move such as that would certainly not be welcomed by the power elite today who are responsible for controlling the world's central banks. So yes, that would certainly be something that would cause his immediate dismissal and the need for other reasons to be brought forth for removing him from power.
So that's why so if you haven't watched the show before and the segments we've done on why they killed Libya or Gaddafi and overthrew Libya, that's why he was going to create a dinar, a dollar for all of Africa that would compete with the euro and the American dollar. And they can't have that. That's exactly what because that's how we control Africa, because we have the U.S. reserve currency as the reserve currency of the world. And that's why we can put sanctions on countries and things like that. And that's why there's BRICS now. And that's what he was way ahead of it, Gaddafi, trying to get off the U.S. dollar. And they stopped it, and they did it by killing him. And of course, they told everybody he was a bad person, even though his country was doing the best of any country in Africa. They had the highest standard of living. Everybody had education. Everybody had a house. Everybody had health care. Everybody had housing. Everybody had everything. And then we had to overthrow it. Now we turn it into a failed state run by terrorists, because that's better.
Burkina Faso, they got destabilized because of what we did. That's why the Burkina Faso guy is sick of us and France. That destabilized all the countries around it. That's how that guy got in there. You know that, right?
No.
Yeah, Burkina Faso is one of the directly affected nations by overthrowing Gaddafi that way. They're sick of that shit.
Just as our strength lies in unified policy and action for progress and development, so the strength of the imperialists lies in our disunity. We in Africa can only meet them effectively by presenting a unified front and a continental purpose. So that's what they don't want. That's what the West, the WEF, NATO, the United States, that's what they don't want. They don't want people just like they don't want us coming together in the United States. They don't want the countries of Africa coming together. They need to keep them fighting amongst each other so they can control them.
Like mafia. It's like just the most mafia thing I've ever heard.
On this day in 1966, the U.S. and Britain colluded in a coup that deposed Kwame Nkrumah, the first leader of independent Ghana and co-founder of a non-aligned movement, because they considered his Pan-Africanist politics to be a threat to Western interests in the region. They've been doing this since forever. This isn't new. The day will come when history will speak, but it will not be the history which will be taught in Brussels, Paris, Washington, or the United Nations. Africa will write its own history, and in both North and South, it will be the history of Lumumba.
He didn't last long after that.
No, after committing one of the most brutal genocides in history, Belgium partnered with the CIA to assassinate Congo's first leader, Patrice Lumumba, a brilliant Pan-Africanist who sought to unite Africa against neocolonialism. They then dissolved his body in sulfuric acid. So that's what the West does in Africa. Africa's
they do it to you. They do it to your kids too.
And now this guy is a friend of Russia. So now he's connecting with Russia, and they can't have that. Since coming to power in September 2022, after the country's second coup that year, this guy, Traoré, I think that's how you say his name, has dwelt on a rhetoric of self-reliance and independence from the West, particularly former colonial ruler France, a message that often resonates with young Africans in the diaspora. The latest Traoré frenzy reached a new peak late April with a solidarity march in the country's capital. Following an alleged coup attempt and comments by General Michael Langley, the head of U.S. military in Africa, accusing Burkina Faso leader of misusing the country's gold reserves. Of course. Following the 2022 coup that brought him to power, he promised to end the country's decades-long deadly security crisis and leverage its rich mineral resources for the benefits of its own 24 million citizens. The West can't have that. Alongside the coup-hit nations of Niger and Mali, Burkina Faso has since severed ties with the regional bloc of ECOWAS, criticized by many young Africans as representing the interest of leaders and not the citizens. as well as long-standing Western allies such as France, whose military provided security support to the government for many years to help the security crisis. Analysts and locals suggest that these factors, combined with his youth, have contributed to Traoré's appeal among young Africans. There is a growing consciousness among African youth at home and abroad that they need to do something about the continent's lack of progress. It appears Traoré has become the face of that consciousness. A senior fellow at the Sengali-based Timbuktu Institute for Peace Studies attributes the current frenzy surrounding Traoré primarily to his popularity and Russian-driven propaganda. Despite Burkina Faso's worsening security crisis, Traoré still has so much resonance and interest simply because of propaganda. In Africa, there is deep frustration with their traditional leadership, so there is polarized anger. So this is the AP trying to tell you that this guy's just being propped up, and there's nothing real about him. Still, allegations of propaganda do not adequately explain the excitement that has built up around Africa's youngest ruler, according to Chidi Akinalu, an African analyst and professor at Tufts University. Traoré articulates a revolutionary message that is appealing to young populations frustrated by the thievery of what passes for democracy in their own countries. That's what's happening. So
you'll never have a leader that good in this country, ever.
Ever. We'll never have a leader that good in this country. And so watch for that guy. They're going to find a way to kill that guy and overthrow him.
Yeah, we taught everybody a lesson. Anytime we're going to get a leader that does that, well, they all around the world.
Yeah, they did it to RFK. They did it to JFK. Anybody who gets on the line, okay. So that's what's happening.
Well, Africa needs to protect a son of the soil like Ibrahim Traoré with all its might. I still wonder, and many, many young people and this woke generation of African people, and actually not just African, but black people in and outside of the continent, still wonder why the rest of African governments haven't thrown weight behind the defense of Ibrahim Traoré and stood with him and borrowed the policies. And it really tells us the influence the West has on African leadership. No wonder the biggest support that Ibrahim Traoré has is with the people, the people on the grassroots, the people on the, in the grassroots levels are the people that love, resonate with Ibrahim Traoré. And he's loved across the spectrum, across the continent and beyond. You have seen black people in America or in the Caribbean, and far beyond that, talk about Ibrahim Traoré and how he is a gem that we must protect if Africa, is to really ever achieve this goal of being a united front and successful continent. Now, the reason why our unity of Africa is a serious threat to the existing status quo or the powers that be in the so-called the Western world, let's go through them just briefly in a random form. Now, first of all, the first one that all of us can agree with is the control of resources. It's resources. Africa and resources is synonymous, is one and the same thing. So Africa holds some of the world's most critical mineral and energy resources, and in good numbers, in vast deposits. A united Africa would bargain as one, and cutting off America's ability or the Western world's ability to exploit these resources cheaply like they have been doing, So, and now you're realizing that there's a certain panic with the West discussing about Africa every time, even without, Africa being on the table of that discussion, because they have realized what is just about to slip out of their hands, or maybe has already slept out of their hands. And then there is political power. So instead of 54 divided African countries or 55 divided voices, Africa as one bloc would have massive influence in, say, the United Nations and, global negotiations, reducing America's and European dominance, and we talk about the third one as military independence. So a united Africa with its own defense system would no longer need France to intervene, the UK to intervene, America to intervene, or so would actually no longer need those foreign US and European bases and troops, weakening the America's strategic grip on the continent, and see what is actually happening with the case with the relationship between West Africa and France. After many countries expelling, French troops from their countries because they deemed as, not really full independence, it has really shaken France's influence even on the global stage, very, very, very deeply. And that's actually eventually going to happen to all of these exploiters of African resources, of, African power and African energy, once they cannot have those military troops here, those that they are actually using to bargain for their own interests selfishly, then it means they have simply lost their, gaining from, that relationship that they have been exploiting. And then the economic freedom is also another point, and unity would allow Africa to build its own banks, industries, and trade systems, and trade within its own self, ending the cycle of Western aid dependency that America actually uses for control purposes and for fostering its own interests abroad. Yeah. And then we can also talk about the global and, the global power shift. So a successful and united Africa would inspire Black people worldwide. So see, I always say, once and when and if Africa gets the respect it deserves, all of other Black people across the world would actually now be respected. See, Black people are always tied eternally to Africa. And that's how they get treated. Any other Black person would just get treated like how an African would still get treated. Now, so that's why I'm saying a successful, united Africa would inspire Black people worldwide, challenging America's racial hierarchy and strengthening alternative global alliances with Africa. For example, you're already seeing now that Africa is totally shifting in its alliance, looking towards BRICS, nations like China and Russia, which actually have really upset the status quo, or we can just say directly, have upset America, have upset Europe. And they are now rushing into those circles to discuss how to handle or to even try to get Africa back to their control. But what has actually happened is an awakening, a serious major awakening in Africa, in which now people have realized this relationship has not been mutually beneficial and has not been respectful, and has been one that is exploiting one side and the African side. And it's not like China or Russia are so good and cannot exploit, but many Africans now know that this kind of relationship bring this kind of relationship, this kind of exploitation, and they are aware, and they are now bargaining with that person that is bringing a better deal to the table. You see, China is coming to Africa with a briefcase full of money for development of infrastructure and other purposes. While generally, if you look at the style America and Europe uses, or the West, they come with a gun and underhand tactics and they want to gaslight Africa to make it look like they don't depend, the West don't need Africa, but they actually seriously really need that is in Africa, including, and now you see that the tactics are working in ways that they create conflicts and instability, and then when they do that, then they can now front their interest, you know. And how about if you compare that with the Chinese strategy of coming to, you know, build Africa or empower Africa so Africa can actually build for itself? Yeah, so that is actually what the kind of notion that is coming with a president like Ibrahim Traoré. And Africa, most, if not all Africa, actually wishes that we could continue to have many and many more presidents backing Traoré, or like Ibrahim Traoré, and then Africa would finally be on the home stretch to independence. And independence of Africa, full independence of Africa, Africa has never been fully independent, would definitely mean the decline of the powers that have actually been. And of course, it's going to upset everything that's been being, you know, taught to us as, you know, the systems of power. Yeah. So that was what I had for you in this video. I want to, you know, believe you might have learned something. You either agree or disagree. Do share with me what you think about this in the comment section below. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and share it. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe to be part of us. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.